Billionaire CEO Marcus Sterling had everything money could buy, except one thing. His autistic son had never spoken a word, until a waitress everyone ignored did something that changed their lives forever. Marcus Sterling was a man the world admired. At just 46 years old, he owned one of the largest tech empires in America. Private jets, luxury penthouses. Headlines called him the man who built the future. But tonight, inside a five-star restaurant filled with flashing cameras and wealthy investors, Marcus wasn't thinking about business. He was watching his 10-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan sat quietly beside him, rocking slightly in his chair, his small fingers tapping the table in a repetitive rhythm Marcus had seen 1,000 times before. Doctors called it autism spectrum disorder, and Marcus called it the one problem money could not fix. Across the table, investors laughed loudly, discussing billion-dollar deals. Marcus forced a smile, but his eyes never left Ethan. If stories like this touch your heart, subscribe and join the family. Before we continue, comment kindness matters below. I read every comment. Now, let's continue. Then suddenly a loud crashing sound echoed across the restaurant. Ethan's body stiffened, his breathing changed. Marcus's heart dropped, because he knew exactly what was about to happen. The noise hit Ethan like a lightning strike. A tray had slipped from a waiter's hands, crashing to the floor with a sharp metallic bang. Plates shattered, glass rolled, conversations stopped. Ethan covered his ears instantly. "No, no, no," he whispered, his voice trembling. His breathing grew fast and uneven. Tears streamed down his face as his chair scraped backward. Heads turned. Whispers started. "What's wrong with him?" "Control your child. This is a high-end place." Marcus stood up, panic flooding his chest. "Ethan, buddy, look at me," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "We're okay." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He dropped to the floor, crying uncontrollably, his small body shaking as if the world had become too loud, too bright, too much. Marcus felt every eye in the restaurant burn into him. For the first time in his powerful life, he felt helpless. And then, from across the room, someone stood up and walked toward them. Marcus barely looked up. He assumed it was another staff member coming to apologize or ask them to leave quietly. And that usually happened during Ethan's episodes, but this time, it was different. Walking toward them was a young black waitress, her uniform simple and slightly wrinkled from a long shift. She moved slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. "Sir," the restaurant manager whispered sharply behind her. "Handle your table and stay out of this." She paused for a second, then kept walking. Marcus frowned, confused by her boldness. Guests watched with open curiosity. Some pulled out their phones, others shook their heads, annoyed by the disruption. Ethan's cries grew louder, echoing across the restaurant floor. The waitress didn't speak to Marcus. She didn't look at the crowd. Instead, she gently knelt beside Ethan, lowering herself to his eye level as if the chaos around them didn't exist. Marcus stepped forward instantly. "Wait," he said, tense. "What are you doing?" She looked up calmly. "Trying to help," she replied softly. The manager rushed forward, his voice sharp and embarrassed. "Lena, step away immediately," he whispered harshly. "You're not trained for this." The waitress, Lena, didn't move. Ethan's cries were now echoing across the entire restaurant, his hands pressed tightly over his ears as his body rocked back and forth on the polished floor. Marcus felt frozen between panic and confusion. Lena slowly placed her serving tray aside, making sure it didn't make a single sound. Then she spoke, but not to Marcus. "Hey, Ethan," she said gently, her voice calm and steady. "I know it feels loud right now." Marcus blinked. He had never told her his son's name. Lena carefully placed her hands on the floor, showing Ethan her palms like a silent signal of safety. She began humming softly, a slow, steady rhythm that barely rose above the restaurant noise. Ethan's crying faltered for just a second, and Marcus suddenly realized she wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what she was doing. Lena kept humming, her voice steady and soothing like a quiet melody floating through the chaos. She slowly tapped her fingers on the floor in a soft rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Ethan's rocking slowed. His sobs softened into shaky breaths. His hands lowered slightly from his ears as his eyes locked onto Lena's movements, following her fingers like they were guiding him back from a storm. Marcus stood frozen, watching something he had never witnessed before. Years of therapy, specialists, private doctors, and expensive programs across the country. None of them had calmed Ethan this quickly. Lena gently slid a folded napkin toward Ethan, folding it into a simple shape, a tiny paper boat. "Look," she whispered. "It's floating." Ethan reached for it with trembling hands. The restaurant fell silent, every guest watching. And then Ethan grabbed Lena's wrist tightly. Marcus stepped forward, alarm flashing in his eyes, but Ethan didn't scream. He leaned closer and opened his mouth to speak. The room felt frozen in time. Ethan's fingers tightened around Lena's wrist, his breathing slow and controlled now. His eyes, usually distant during moments like this, were focused, fully present. Marcus held his breath. "Ethan," he whispered, afraid that even his voice might break the moment. Lena stayed perfectly still. "It's okay," she murmured. "Take your time." Ethan's lips trembled. His jaw moved as if he were searching for something he'd never reached before. Then, in a soft, almost broken voice, he said, Nah." The sound was quiet, but it hit Marcus like thunder. His knees nearly gave out. Doctors had told him Ethan might never speak clearly. Years had passed without a single full word spoken to a stranger. Tears flooded Marcus's eyes as the restaurant erupted in gasps. Lena's eyes filled too, her hand shaking. She smiled gently. "Hi, Ethan," she whispered. Marcus knew in that moment, nothing in his life would ever be the same again. For several seconds, no one moved. The restaurant, once loud and impatient, sat in stunned silence. Investors, waiters, strangers, all frozen by the single word Ethan had spoken. Ere Marcus finally dropped to his knees. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about the stares. He pulled Ethan into his arms, holding him tightly, afraid this moment might disappear if he let go. "You spoke," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "You really spoke." Ethan didn't pull away. Instead, he rested his head against his father's chest. Something he rarely did. Lena slowly stood up, wiping tears from her eyes, already stepping back like she had crossed an invisible line. "I should get back to work," she said softly. The manager stormed forward. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. "You disrupted the entire restaurant." Marcus looked up, and for the first time that night, his expression changed, because something inside him had just awakened. The manager crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. You violated protocol," he said sharply to Lena. "We have rules for a reason. You're a waitress, not a therapist." Lena lowered her eyes. "I was just trying to help," she said quietly. Marcus slowly stood up, his face unreadable. "Help?" the manager scoffed. "Sir, I apologize for the disturbance. We'll handle this employee immediately." He turned to signal security. "That won't be necessary," Marcus said calmly. The manager paused. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. With one hand, he still held Ethan close. "What's your name?" Marcus asked the manager. Thomas," he replied, suddenly uneasy. Marcus nodded. And how long have you worked here, Thomas? The question sounded harmless, but something in Marcus's tone made the air feel heavy, because Thomas had no idea who he was talking to. Thomas straightened his jacket, trying to maintain authority. I've managed this restaurant for 8 years, he said proudly. We maintain very high standards here. Marcus nodded slowly, studying him. I'm sure you do, he replied. He turned his phone screen toward Thomas. The manager leaned closer. His face drained instantly. Displayed on the screen was Marcus Sterling's corporate profile, founder of Sterling Innovations, the parent company that owned the entire luxury restaurant chain. Thomas's mouth opened, but no words came out. Around them, a few staff members began whispering nervously. Some recognized the name immediately. Marcus's voice stayed calm, almost too calm. You were about to remove the one person who helped my son when everyone else stood there watching, he said quietly. Thomas stammered, sweat forming on his forehead. I didn't realize. Marcus glanced toward Lena, who still stood frozen near the table. That, Marcus said firmly, is exactly the problem. Thomas swallowed hard, his confidence completely gone. I sincerely apologize, Mr. Sterling, he said quickly. We value all our employees. I assure you this was a misunderstanding. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned toward Lena. She looked uncomfortable, almost wishing she could disappear. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her tray, trying to return to her duties like nothing had happened. What's your full name? Marcus asked gently. She hesitated. Lena Carter, she replied. Marcus studied her face carefully, like he was searching for answers beyond her words. How did you know how to calm him? He asked. Lena froze, and the restaurant grew quiet again. That wasn't something you just guessed, Marcus continued. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes dropped to the floor as if a memory had suddenly pulled her somewhere painful. I didn't guess, she whispered. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Then how did you learn? He asked softly. Lena took a deep breath, and the answer she was about to give would change everything. Lena's fingers tightened around her tray as she stared at the floor. My younger brother, she said quietly. Marcus leaned closer, listening carefully. His name was Jaden, she continued. He had autism too, severe sensory sensitivity. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes shimmered with memories she clearly tried to hide. Our parents worked 2 jobs each. Therapy was expensive, so most of the time, it was just me and him. Marcus felt something twist inside his chest. I learned how to calm him during meltdowns, she said softly. The humming, the rhythm tapping, and folding paper. Those were the only things that helped him feel safe. Ethan watched her closely now, holding the tiny paper boat in his hands. Marcus swallowed hard. Where is your brother now? He asked gently. Lena's silence lasted longer this time. Her eyes slowly filled with tears she couldn't stop anymore. He passed away, she whispered, and the pain in her voice told Marcus there was much more to that story. Lena wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed by the silence she had created. Jaden didn't die from autism, she said quietly. He died from lack of help. Marcus felt his chest tighten. She explained how insurance delays, missed appointments, and unaffordable therapy slowly wore their family down. How she dropped out of college to care for her brother full-time. How exhaustion became normal. The night he passed, Lena continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I was working a double shift, trying to pay for his next treatment. Marcus couldn't look away. I wasn't there when he needed me most, she said. So when I saw your son, I couldn't walk away. Ethan shifted closer to her instinctively. Marcus felt something crack inside him, because for the first time he realized Lena hadn't just saved his son. She had been reliving her greatest regret. And suddenly Marcus wondered, what had his own absence cost Ethan? Marcus felt the room fade away. Lena's words echoed in his mind like a quiet accusation. I wasn't there when he needed me most. And he looked down at Ethan, his son, who was now calmly folding the paper boat over and over, glancing up at Lena with quiet trust. Marcus had paid for the best doctors in the world, private schools, private therapists, private everything. But how many times had he missed dinner? How many meltdowns had he handed off to assistants? How many moments had he chosen meetings over his child? I thought providing money was enough, Marcus admitted softly. I told myself I was doing this for him. Lena met his eyes. Kids like them don't remember money, she said gently. They remember who made them feel safe. That sentence hit Marcus harder than any boardroom failure ever had. And for the first time in his life, he questioned the empire he had built. Marcus stood silently for a moment, then turned fully toward Lena. I want to help you, he said. Lena immediately shook her head. You don't owe me anything, she replied quickly. I was just doing what anyone should do. Marcus stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. I owe you more than you realize. He explained that he wanted to pay for her education, cover her family expenses, and offer her a leadership role in one of his company's new community programs. Gasps spread quietly among the staff listening nearby. Thomas, the manager, looked stunned, but Lena's expression didn't change. I can't accept that, she said softly. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting rejection. You helped my son speak, he said. Why refuse something that could change your life? Lena hesitated, gathering courage. Because money isn't what your son needs right now, she said. Marcus froze, and the next word she spoke would shake him completely. Lena took a slow breath. Your son doesn't need another program, she said gently. He needs you. The words landed hard. Marcus felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. You're always here, she continued, her voice steady but honest. Physically, but not emotionally. Silence wrapped around them. I watched you panic tonight, Lena said. Not because he was hurting him, but because people were watching. Marcus opened his mouth to defend himself, then stopped. She was right. Ethan felt safe with me, Lena said softly. Not because I'm special, but because I stayed. I listened. I didn't rush him. Tears filled Marcus's eyes. I don't know how, he admitted quietly. Lena knelt beside Ethan again. Then learn, she said. Eat like I had to. Marcus looked down at his son, and for the first time, he chose not to run. Marcus slowly lowered himself to the floor beside Ethan and Lena, the expensive fabric of his suit pressed against the polished restaurant tiles. But for once, he didn't care. What do I do? He asked quietly. Lena gave him a small, encouraging smile. Start by meeting him where he is, she said. She showed Marcus how to tap gently on the floor in the same slow rhythm she had used earlier. Marcus hesitated, then copied her movements. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Ethan's eyes shifted toward his father. Marcus swallowed, his hands trembling slightly as he repeated the pattern again. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then Ethan slowly slid the paper boat toward him. Marcus stared at it like it was the most valuable gift he had ever received. Around them, the restaurant faded into background noise, because father and son were finally connecting. And Marcus realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. This was only the beginning. The following morning, Marcus sat inside his corporate boardroom staring at reports he normally would have reviewed without hesitation. But today his mind was somewhere else. "Marcus," one of the board members said, "we need approval for the expansion project. It requires your full attention." Marcus looked around the table at executives who depended on his leadership. Then he surprised everyone. "I'm stepping back from daily operations," he announced calmly. The room exploded with shock. "That's impossible," another executive said. You're the face of this company." Marcus folded his hands slowly. "I've spent years building this empire," he said, "and almost lost the only thing that actually matters." He explained he wanted to restructure company priorities, including creating national autism support programs and family resources. Several board members exchanged worried glances. One leaned forward. "You realize shareholders won't support this," he warned. Marcus nodded. "I'm aware," he replied. But inside, he had already made his choice. Within weeks, Marcus stood behind a podium at a major press conference. Cameras flashed non-stop. Reporters crowded the room expecting another corporate announcement. But Marcus's tone was different this time. "Today," he began, "Sterling Innovations is launching a nationwide autism support initiative." The audience murmured with surprise. Marcus explained the program would fund therapy access, provide family support resources, and train schools to better assist children with sensory challenges. Then he paused. "This foundation will be named the Jaden Carter Foundation." Lena, watching from backstage, froze. Marcus continued, his voice steady but emotional. Jaden Carter was a young boy who deserved better support than he received. His story represents thousands of families fighting the same battle. Cameras turned toward Lena as Marcus invited her onto the stage. The crowd applauded loudly. But Marcus wasn't finished yet, because his final announcement would change Lena's life forever. Marcus turned toward Lena, his eyes meeting hers in front of the world. "Lena Carter," he said into the microphone, "I want you to lead this foundation." The room gasped. Lena's hands trembled. "Me?" she whispered. "You didn't just change my son's life," Marcus continued. "You changed mine. And you understand these families in a way money never could." Tears streamed down Lena's face as the crowd rose to their feet in applause. She stepped forward slowly, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said honestly. Marcus smiled gently. "Neither was I. When I became a father." Cameras flashed. Headlines were already being written. But in that moment, Lena wasn't thinking about fame or opportunity. She was thinking about her brother and how his life and his pain had finally meant something. 6 months later, Marcus sat in a quiet therapy center built through the Jaden Carter Foundation. Children laughed softly in sensory-friendly rooms. Parents spoke with trained counselors. Hope filled a place where fear once lived. Across the room, Ethan sat beside Lena, carefully folding another paper boat. Marcus watched them, his heart steady in a way it had never been before. "Dad," Ethan said suddenly, his voice soft but clear. Marcus froze, then smiled as Ethan handed him the paper boat. "For you." Marcus swallowed tears, accepting it like a priceless treasure. "Thank you, buddy," he whispered. Lena watched them, smiling quietly. Jaden's framed photo hung on the wall nearby, overlooking families now receiving help her brother never had. Marcus placed the paper boat beside the frame, and because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness don't just change one life. They build legacies that change thousands. And for Marcus Sterling, everything finally made sense. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people discover stories that inspire change. And tell me in the comments, What was the most powerful moment in this story for you? Don't forget to subscribe if you love emotional real-life stories like this, because the next story might touch your life even more. Until next time, remember, one small act of kindness can change someone's entire world.